All right, welcome back to the Central Valley Buzz, everybody. I'm your host, Chuck Leonard. William, let's bring in our next guest, Mr. Michael Bogart. Hello, sir. How are you? Really good to see you. What's happening?
Well, I thought we'd talk a little bit more about what we started last week. Remember, I started last week by talking about a class that I'm teaching online, and it's a class online. It's an online class.
Oh, online.
Computer-based.
I thought you were teaching a course on how to lie.
No, quite the opposite. It's a class on world religions that I teach sometimes for an online university. And one of the first assignments is the students have to introduce themselves, and they can talk a little bit about their own background if they want to. And I noticed a trend over the semesters I've taught this class in that students, I'd say a fairly healthy percentage of students who are raised in Christianity have walked away from it because of what they call mean-spirited actions by church people.
Oh.
And so,
you mean they got treated meanly?
Well, that's what they say, yes. And as
like what? They were admonished in front of others?
It's a variety of things. People were told not to come back to church for one reason or another, excluded from certain things because of certain behaviors, that sort of thing.
Do you know, I know some people that work for churches, and what I've found is, like, when they're going to replace those people, they generally don't tell them. They usually find out in the newsletter that their job is available.
Well, it's that sort of thing that my students keep bringing up. And as a pastor myself, in former years, and a Christian leader myself, that got my attention, if people are leaving for those reasons. So I wanted to explore that a little bit. And of course, I wrote this book, The 45-Minute Bible, that it's not dealing with that specifically, but it's an effort to try to get people interested in this time that we're living in following Jesus. And I think the conclusion that I came to that I wanted to really talk about today was sometimes, at least in my experience as somebody who's been in Christian ministry for 40 years, doing church can be something very different than following Jesus.
Right.
Doesn't have to be. I mean, sometimes they go together, but I think what
like as a social get-together?
That the church has an agenda sometimes that doesn't always go directly with a person following Jesus in their life.
No.
I'm sure this is no surprise to a lot of people, but it's one of those things that I think a lot of times my students and people like my students are reacting to is church doing church things that don't necessarily represent Jesus very well.
Am I okay to say that some pastors, priests, reverends are a little egotistical and they might be doing it for them?
Well, certainly. I think with any organization, whether it's church or business or government, the ego can easily creep in there. And I think you can find lots of examples of Christian leaders that their ego has gotten in the way of what they're really
that could be a
called to do.
It's kind of opposite of what they're teaching.
Jesus says, take up your cross, and the New Testament says, treat others better than yourself.
I thought he said there's no ego button on the cash register.
That could very well be. But, I think that this is something, in my opinion, and I think I've sort of earned the right after all these years to say, I think it's time for the church to step back in the 21st century and really look at what we're trying to do and how to communicate what we're trying to do to a generation of people that are not used to hearing it the way we're used to delivering it.
Right. Now, we've talked before about the internet, where you get the young kids on the internet. You get these 5-6-year-olds, I see them just surfing the internet like crazy. And then we have this segment of the population in age that's falling off from the Christian radar.
Correct.
Okay, and I can't help but think that has something to do with it. Let me tell you something.
All right.
My son, not a believer.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't raise him that way. It's just he got older and he made up his own decision.
Choices, yeah.
And his mom raised strong Catholic, and man, they really have a hard time with this.
Yeah.
And I can't not say that he doesn't have some valid points. But she's raised to believe in the Catholic thing. It's very strong.
Right. Yeah.
But I hate to see them fight over it.
Well, and I think this is something that all kinds of families are going through these days. I mean, even my own family. you've got a generation.
Wouldn't it be easy to question it with the way the world is these days?
It's very easy to question it, especially if you're one of these people that's on the internet most of your waking hours.
You see a school shot up with the little kids dying, and isn't that hard?
The question of evil and why suffering and evil exists in the world has always been one of those things that Christians have endeavored to supply a satisfactory answer to. And I in a way, that's kind of the big question Christians have to deal with. There's other questions other religious people have to deal with, but that's the one for Christians. If God is so good, so powerful, so loving, why is there suffering and evil in the world?
I find that some of these younger kids look at these stories in the Bible and it's just so outlandish. And I just say, well, wait a minute, what's the message? Maybe there wasn't a walking on the water, but what was the message? Maybe he doesn't make bread out of rocks, but what's the message?
Well, and that's one approach to interpreting the biblical stories in terms of message rather than actual facts. That's not the one I take. I tend to believe in the miracles, but I think that the message of the Bible actually has the ability to deeply resonate with people today if it's presented properly. Mm-hmm. Hence my book.
There you go.
Now I didn't really intend to promote my book necessarily, but I think we're not picking up on the cues of how things need to be presented today. Because if what I believe about God and about Jesus Christ are true, it's the most attractive thing that you could possibly have happen in your life. It's compelling. It's life-changing, but we're not communicating it as that. We're communicating it as a bunch of rules. We're communicating that if you become part of us, you're going to be a turnoff to everybody else, like some of us are. I think we have to reevaluate how we communicate this message in a way that allows it to be as positive as it really is.
Okay, let's reevaluate it right now. We talked about bathrooms earlier on in the show. Where do you stand on that?
The bathroom issue. Well, of course, I've trained Christian leaders all over the developing world where bathroom issues are not.
But
you're just glad to have a bathroom.
Transgender thing. That's where I'm getting. Where do you guys stand on that?
Where do we stand on the transgender bathroom issue?
Yeah.
Well, I think if it's clearly marked that it's a unisex bathroom, then that's the way it goes. But I have a little bit of a hard time with, and I know my wife would have a little hard time with a male going into a clearly female bathroom. So. I don't know. I don't think.
But we're not talking about males going into female
Well,
bathrooms.
I understand what you're saying. But a guy who appears to be a male, that sort of thing. My wife would have a real hard. I think a lot of ladies have a hard time with that. And I think, though people want to be sensitive to the transgender folks, I think we're forgetting there's another group of people we need to be sensitive to. That's my take.
Okay.
But if a bathroom's
so
clearly
girls
marked,
shouldn't wear baseball hats and jeans. Darn it.
Well, now you're opening up a whole other can of worms,
I asked you.
Chuck.
You answered it. Okay. All right, this is Michael Bogart. He's a good friend of mine. He teaches out at West Hills College. 45-Minute Bible is just one of his books. You can find it on mindcuisine.com. And also, check out some of his other books. Understanding Islam, Understanding Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness.
Correct. New Age.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's a good read. Mike, thanks for coming.
Always a pleasure, Chuck.
Always good to talk to you. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.